It's just a matter of time when Bitcoin has the same purchasing power of $43 million today for a single Bitcoin. I could never have imagined that we'd be as far progressed as we are now. We're coming into price discovery. I think we're in a very different cycle. I've been of the opinion that we'll see the super cycle pretty soon. This year, I expect. I remember waking up the next day, it was a Saturday morning, and just thinking to myself, I don't have enough Bitcoin. You know it's going up forever. The singular most important thing that you can do for yourself in your life is
Mr. Richard Byworth, thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Great to sit down with you finally after meeting you in Vegas this year. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Likewise. You're too kind. So we were talking offline about many things. We were just talking about we were smashing through USD all-time highs, unbelievably incredible things really happening across the world. And one of my good buddies, Dante Cook from Simply Bitcoin, is just doing some stuff about millennials, the younger generations. They can't save for anything, for housing. They can't save for retirement. They're really getting low on their thoughts on capitalism. And they think socialism and communism is the way of the future and things of that nature. So do we need black swan events? Do we need these massive events, the Canadian truckers, Dutch farmer incidences, for those things to keep happening, to keep touching the stove until people start understanding the life raft is right in front of them? They're waiting for the cruise ship, but the life raft is sitting right there for them, and they're just not taking to it. Like, can you walk us through this and unpack this for us?
Yeah, I think it is a fantastic question. And it's something that bothers me significantly. It's you and I, people like us, I feel, have a responsibility as educators to speak in our own voices, to connect with the people who want to listen to us in the way we speak, and can teach and they can learn from us. Because unfortunately, Bitcoin is a complex subject, and Saylor famously says you need 1,000 hours of study to understand Bitcoin. And, I see it. I'm in the financial industry. There's many people in this space that think they understand Bitcoin, but they're just miles away from understanding it. They still have a lot of ego. For them, it's a trade. And, they're in and they're out. And then they watch it gap away from them, and they'll never buy it again because they're just irritated with the fact they've missed it. Now, the cohort, I care less about that cohort, of course. The cohort I care about, and I think you do too, are the people that, are suffering within the financial system and have no idea why they're suffering. They have no idea why their bills keep getting more expensive, and, their salary is not moving in line with the speed at which things are getting more expensive. And, I feel it all the time. I had a good friend of mine. She's a single mother from London. And for years, I've been telling her, just buy some Bitcoin. Oh, I can't afford it. I don't have time to, pay attention to it. I was like, listen, just if you got even £20 that you can put aside a month, and this was 6-7 years ago, if she'd listened to me, she'd be in a very good position. But of course, when you're dealing with being a single mother, you're struggling to put meals on the table. The idea of even £20 it's a lot of money, and it's frustrating. But we had that same conversation. It was her 50th recently. We were in Ibiza celebrating, and I'm like, but this is an expensive holiday you're on, right? Like, if you just put a bit of money aside, you'd be in a much stronger position. And unfortunately, her boyfriend now is someone who really groks Bitcoin and has become a Bitcoin maxi over the last couple of years. And so he's really helping educate her. But I think that it's the same problem for a lot of people. It's like, I don't have enough time to learn about it. I don't have time to watch a podcast, right? And I don't have any money to set aside. And the problem is that only gets worse and worse, and you're running faster and faster and getting nowhere faster and faster without actually having any savings. And I think as a result, it ends up that you become more reliant on government. You want the handouts. And of course, that leans you more towards a socialist stroke communist mindset. And, anyone who studied history knows that's not a model that works. Capitalism is the best model. It's not the optimal model. Doesn't always benefit the people that deserve it the most or merit it the most, but it's the closest to something that works that we have. And so it's very unfortunate that the younger people are being sort of lent in that direction. I think education is also a big part of it. These institutions, as we've seen in the US, but it's the same in the UK, it's the same everywhere across Europe. And so that's the education that people end up being slightly educated by. And, I always say to the young people in the organization that I work in or people that come to me for guidance is the singular most important thing that you can do for yourself in your life is take control of every single aspect of your life. Take responsibility, because it is all in your control. You can have an agency mindset or a victimhood mindset. And the victimhood mindset is the mindset that keeps you forever in slavery. And it's really sad. Lots of people are told that they're victims. And it's actually a way to keep people in enslavement in the fiat system. And it's really sad that people fall for it, because the best thing you can do for yourself is take agency, and Bitcoin is a big part of that. So maybe I veered a little bit off track for your podcast, so apologies if I did.
No, this is what it's about. And this is what my next question really had to do with, and I've seen you talk about this before, but Bitcoin being truth and it reorienting truth. And the thing I always think of too, because I've had many people over time come to me and say, about the capitalism thing, like, oh, capitalism. And, and it wasn't so much that capitalism is the bad thing. It was that inflation's part of capitalism. And like those things were just, it's like, that's just part of the system. That's how capitalism works. And I would love your thoughts on it, but I'm always trying to explain to people that, and this is my way of seeing it and explaining it, just money is the foundation, it's the bedrock you choose. Well, hopefully it's bedrock, but you're choosing a money that the economic system rides on top of, and they're separate things, and people lump them in together and think that inflation is just a part of capitalism. And that is wild to me. But like you said, it goes back to the teachings and the compulsory schooling now in the West for the last 100 years of teaching these Keynesian economics, where it couldn't be further from the truth. So capitalism, hopefully with Bitcoin, a solid bedrock monetary layer, will start to heal, and people have all an equal chance, not an equal outcome, an equal chance, equal playing field. So I would love your thoughts on that, and just kind of how you see that as well. If you think kind of the same way, or if you think of it a different way, or.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, money printing is communism. It is saying that the government can take money, right, to better allocate it. So it takes money from everybody. Anyone that holds the money, they're taking money from you by debasing it, and then spending it on whatever they deem the right things to be spending it on. That is how communism works. So basically the idea is to impoverish everybody, so everybody becomes completely reliant on the government, and then that's where you have ultimate centralized government control. And I mean, I have family that still live in the UK, and I really genuinely am saddened by what is happening in the UK, because it is the route to full-blown communism. Tax everybody for everything. If I'm a father, if I work my whole life paying taxes and then decide to give money to my kids, they have to be taxed again, so that the government can then take half that money and decide how to allocate it. I mean, that is just constant theft at the end of the day. And at a certain point it's too much. And, I live in Switzerland now, and this is, I think 48% of new expats into Switzerland are British.
Wow.
The UK is second only to China in terms of last year, in terms of the amount of millionaires that left the country. So China obviously has a much higher population. So absolutely, it's always going to be a higher number. But UK was second only to China in terms of millionaires leaving the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very real brain drain. That's that's, boy. So I grew up in Michigan, so I'm an hour north of Detroit. And for anyone who understands Detroit, obviously the Motor City, The big three are located with, obviously the car manufacturing, and or at least it was for a long time, and then that's where a lot of it is gone now because of the brain drain, because of really a lot of terrible local policy. The city of Detroit and things of that nature, and then the auto industry itself, the too big to fail. The bailouts, like things like that, where we were basically going against capitalism. Anything but capitalism was happening, and then all the smart people or people with money were like, "Yeah, I'm out of here. Like this is ridiculous." So I think the most sinister thing, though, that people don't realize is that you don't just put that genie back in the bottle. Like once the toothpaste is out of the tube, like if your manufacturing goes away and everything shuts down, you can't just like flip the switch back on one day and like, you know what, just joking. We're sorry. It's like that doesn't work like that. Like those people are gone. They left. They're on the other side of the world, and the manufacturers are shut down. They literally rusted away.
Yeah.
They are gone. So you lose. Like people just don't even, it's wild. Absolutely wild.
And the problem is, Brandon, if they stay away for long enough, the country hits demise, where to your point, it becomes completely irreversible. In the UK, if things were reversed in the next 4 years, then maybe they got a shot, because London is a great city of attracting people back. And, the rest of the UK has some amazing parts in it, but it's going to deteriorate and deteriorate as, to your point, you end up losing the productive people, right? Everybody's like, oh, I hate the rich. Well, it's like, well, these are the people that build businesses, grow businesses, and employ people. Like, and you're actively just pushing them out of the country.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is like wealthy people have more and more options than ever today, right? You got Dubai, you got Abu Dhabi, you got Switzerland, you've got Hong Kong, you got Singapore, all these jurisdictions. I haven't even talked about, what goes on in the Caribbean as well. So like people have got plenty of places they can go. They don't need to be in a place where standard of living is dropping and taxes are just going through the roof. As I said, I still have family there. I drive, my son goes to school in the UK. So I'm driving in the UK a lot. The roads are full of potholes. But in terms of the amount of tax that people are paying, it's like, where's all the money going? Right?
Exactly.
It's, and this is obviously what Elon was trying to solve within the US. We need an Elon to come out in the UK and start looking at where the money's going, because I have questions.
Yeah, that's where you were saying, before, and you've talked about this many times, Bitcoin is truth. We talk about this in Michigan all the time. We're like, where this road thing, and Michigan's famous for terrible roads as well. And it's like, where is the money going? Like, is it being extorted? Is it being laundered? And with, regular old fiat, even gold and silver, right? It becomes fiat at some point. So you can't tell, you don't know where it's going. You can't audit it. No one can ask questions, and it's just gone. And who knows who has it, and it's not going to the right places. So it's just, man, it's sad. I don't know who was, I don't know if it's you. In the last week or so, I was watching either something you were on, or, you were speaking or something. I don't know if it was like Preston Fish, or I don't know who it was, but it was like, it was, if you're not 16 years in, if you're not getting Bitcoin, like we kind of have to question you. Like are you okay? Like, is there something wrong? Like how do you, at this point, like I get like 10 years ago not getting it and understanding it, but at this point, come on, like what's going on here? We got to question you.
Yeah, I did say that on a
Okay.
podcast. I forgot whose podcast it was, but then I felt bad about it, because I was like, well, actually, it's not fair to say it's on you, because there's so much distraction out there, and it's all deliberate to distract you away from it. You've got the ECB commenting on how Bitcoin's terrible. You've got what's her name, Christine Lagarde, commenting on Bitcoin. You just had the governor of the Bank of England today say that people need to buy Bitcoin with their eyes wide open, because it's a really irresponsible way to allocate capital. So if you're in, if you don't understand anything about finance, you're going to listen to these people and say, well, they're the people that know. They're the, I don't want to listen to that guy on the Syz podcast with the long hair. He looks a bit crazy. So, they want to listen to the Bank of England governor, right? For them, that's someone with status, with importance, who understands the economy, of course. and as much the boomer generation, I would say also the younger people who, artists, school teachers, blue collar workers who don't understand finance. Well, they're going to look to these leaders and assume that they're telling them the truth. Whereas what Andrew Bailey obviously is trying to do is stop people fleeing the pound, because if they do, then it diminishes his ability to keep debasing it without a complete repricing. And, we always, as Bitcoiners, we always say, you vote with your Bitcoin. You get to vote against all the nonsense that comes with the fiat system by putting your money into Bitcoin. And I think that's very powerful. And this is what they're all fighting against, right? They don't care about your average person. They're just trying to keep the system propped up so they can line their pockets and, line their friends' pockets and keep the thing going so that at least while they're still in the job, there's no collapse.
Yeah. And I love that you said the boomer class takes a lot of the heat of just like, just trusting, not verifying. And the younger generation, it's like, they come off, at least they try to come off as like so enlightened and like, we're not doing the same things the boomers did. And it's like, still human at the end of the day, right? Like you still get sucked in by the same rationalization and, human, and psychology and just all these things where like it knows no boundaries. And it's about moving the Overton window, right? I mean, money is psychology, it's a psychological engine. So at the end of the day, it's, people, they want to, we get so literal at times, and it's an Overton window we're trying to push and change the narrative and wake people up, right? So like, that's why people get so caught up sometimes in this, but it's not, we're playing an information war and getting people to wake up. That's the game. Like you said, that's why you come on to podcasts. That's why I do this podcast. I specifically, I'm trying to reach, the average person who might not understand, if you want to hear Richard talk about really super advanced stuff, going on, watching him on Preston's podcast or, some other ones might be a really good thing. But for me, I look at it as like 95% of the world needs to wake up. If we're talking super, super advanced stuff all day long here, we're just going to be in our echo chamber. And that might be great for Richard and I to talk about, but it's not going to help the average person. So that's where, like you touched on this earlier, and that's what kind of made me think of it too. Like reaching, like we have a duty. I know we feel an obligation to go share what we know with other people. So
I do definitely feel a level of responsibility to try and help people understand. No one around me in my circle, other than the people that I've just been hammering about it for years and years, have got any idea. It's remarkable. And I ask everybody that. I mean, like, I'll ask you the same question. It's like, of your circle of friends, I mean, you're a Bitcoiner, you've got a Bitcoin podcast. How many people really understand Bitcoin of your close friends?
I could count on one hand. I'll tell you that.
Exactly. It's insane.
8 years.
And that's pretty much what you do all the time. And I'm the same. And, obviously I'm becoming friends with a lot more Bitcoiners of late, but in my natural circle of friends before sort of getting to know a lot of Bitcoiners, it's one hand. It's one hand of people that really know.
It's wild.
It's crazy. Despite everything we do, we're trying all the time to be out on podcasts. I do like 2 or 3 a week. But it's just, I don't know. It just feels like people are stuck in the matrix and they can't get out of it. Like we said, I don't have time. I'll send people stuff. Okay, you don't want to watch my podcast, I understand. But like, watch this guy. Like this guy, like.
Can't be a messiah in your own town, right?
No. People are like, oh, shut up. I know you.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, I spent a bit of time with Joe Bryan. I don't know if you know him, in Prague. He put that video, What's the Problem, together. And I think that is really powerful. So now I just send that to people. I'm like, it's not even about Bitcoin. It's just understanding what is broken. Like, if you can understand what is broken and the fact that there might be a solution, if what I'm telling you is true, then you are a good step of the way there. Right. So I'm using that a lot these days.
Yeah. So good.
Mm.
That's so good. Do you think that, I was going to ask you about just the dollar breaking in general, in the general sense of, do you think, because this is a question I've been asking people actually a fair amount too. I asked this with Peter recently. I think it was last week. I just posted his interview I did with him, Peter Dunworth. And it's, when do you think, like, how long, like we have the stablecoin stuff going on here in America now, right? It's going on all around the world, but then we actually have federal legislation now in America. So it's this thing where I know a lot of Bitcoiners think it's an on-ramp to Bitcoin. And then there's some that are like, oh, get that out of here. It's going to be a CBDC and, yada, yada, yada. So like you have all these like varying ideas of what stablecoins are going to be. In saying all that though, do you think that stablecoins or just, I guess you can touch on stablecoins, but just in general, like, will the dollar, do you think it's a long runway in the sense of like governments aren't going to give up that power easily, and it's going to continually just be beaten into the ground, like we were saying, for so long that, yeah, Bitcoin could be $1 billion per Bitcoin for sure. But what does a dollar actually buy you at that point? And I think that's like this, everyone's trying to weigh that, I guess. So like, do you see the dollar or fiat currencies having this really long runway where it doesn't just flip overnight and they just evaporate? Or maybe they do. Maybe in 5 years, 10 years, that 10% of society, like you said, or 70% of your friends are like, yeah, I'm not taking this worthless piece of trash, so it's gone. And then immediately, and then it does die. It just dies overnight. Like, how do you see that playing out, or maybe in the timeline of events? Because I know everyone has such wildly different opinions when it comes to the dollar and just fiat currencies in general.
Yeah, I guess probably a more satisfying way to answer your question is that if we price Bitcoin in dollar terms today, what is one Bitcoin worth once everybody works it out? I agree with Jeff Booth. It's $43 million because that's the entire financial system. So it's the other side of every trade, which is what Mallers has said. So I actually think Mallers agrees with Booth, right?
Yeah.
So it's 900 or a quadrillion. That we're looking at today. So yeah, like it's just a matter of time when Bitcoin has the same purchasing power of $43 million today for a single Bitcoin.
Yeah. I agree with you. So like that's where I stand, and it's the purchasing power. Mike Maloney was the gold and silver for me 15 years ago. I was leaving college, university 15 years ago when the great financial crisis happened after I got done playing hockey. And I went and played professionally for a couple of years. But during that time, that's when I was studying everything in 08, 9, 10, 11. And Mike Maloney would always say that everyone knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. And it's always a purchasing power thing. And that blew my mind as a 22-year-old kid and being like, wow, I've never heard that before. What the hell is this? How come I didn't learn this in school? You're getting mad and you're like, what? We're reading Creature from Jekyll Island, and you're going down that rabbit hole. And that was me 17 years ago. So in saying all that, I would love to segue a little bit to just your, like, what clicked for you? Like, what was it that really, because again, I know you're, and I was talking to Matt Hogan recently too. We just dropped that one a couple of weeks ago. His was similar. Like, hey, I got into it 2017, 18, 19, and really started to get conviction, I got it, but I didn't until I really started seeing what Bitcoin was, that it really started to get elevated once I got on, started buying and started doing work in that world. So what were some of the things that kind of clicked for you when it came to Bitcoin? And you're like, whoa, this is different than anything I've ever seen before.
I think it was digital scarcity when I understood that. And back in 2016, well, I first heard about Bitcoin in 2011. And the first thing that people were talking about was it's a great technology. They weren't talking about, the fact that there's only 21 million. And I think if I'd understood there were only 21 million back then, I would probably not have just said, can you please shut up about your internet scam? So I think the penny dropped for me. I mean, I first started buying crypto.
Hold on 1 second. If you are holding your Bitcoin on an exchange still or sharing your keys and your KYC information with a third party, everything you're learning about right now is completely moot. This is your wake-up call. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. Bitcoin is the first and only asset in human history where humans can actually custody entirely their asset. Custody sounds daunting at first, and believe me, it was for me 10 years ago, and I missed a year or two of massive gains, and I don't want that to be you. It's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbak and the Bitcoin Way. His team will train you to do it right the first time. We just interviewed Tony the other day, has 50,000 views, an unbelievable response. People love him and his story and what he has to share in his mission. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. So quit sitting on your hands like I did a decade ago and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/Brandon. Now back to the show.
When I heard about Bitcoin, so I read the book Sapiens in early 2017, and Harari obviously was talking about a lot of things that I thought might happen in the future, but he kept talking about Bitcoin. And so I started studying it a bit, and I didn't even get to the point of understanding that it was finite, truly finite, compared to anything else we've ever had as an asset. Because I was a hard money guy. Like in 2008, when the crisis happened, and I had the guy sat on the desk next to me in Tokyo going down to his Citibank account and taking all the cash out because he thought that Citibank was going to go bankrupt.
Wow.
Like that's how, like the level of panic that there was within a financial services industry.
Wow.
So I was, when they obviously came and started saving things with printing just a huge amount of money, which is nothing compared to what we see being printed today. I looked at that and said, okay, my money's being debased. I need to find something to store value. And so I started buying gold. In 2009, I started buying gold quite actively. So when I started to understand Bitcoin, and then when I realized that it was completely finite, that was really the moment. It was probably I know when it was. It was in October 2018, because Bitcoin was trading at about 6,000. And I went to bed just after listening to the Pomp podcast with a guy called Murad, who, if you've been around in Bitcoin a little while, you've probably heard of him. And I remember waking up the next day, it was a Saturday morning, and just thinking to myself, I don't have enough Bitcoin. And that was really the moment where it flipped. And so, yeah, but then it was still from there. It was a gradual process of learning, getting higher conviction, getting more conviction, and to the point which, again, Saylor always says, buying the top forever. Once you've got that level of conviction, you can sit through any drawdown. I remember a funny story when I'd been trying to pitch my boomer uncle for years to buy Bitcoin. And then I remember we were at I guess it was Christmas of 2022. So FTX had just happened, and Bitcoin was trading like, I don't know, 20K, 18K or something. And we were in my parents' kitchen, and he sort of comes up next to me. He's like, so, how are you feeling about your Bitcoin now, eh? It was such a comical moment, because I was just like, wow, you just, you don't understand anything. Like I'm more convicted than ever. Like this is the moment where you just back up the truck. Mm-hmm. And I remember I took all my cash I had left in the world and put it all into the Grayscale Bitcoin ETF, because it was a 50% discount.
Yes.
But yeah, for me, that was just a lovely opportunity that we were given. Obviously, it was a painful one for the industry, but
right.
That's the great thing about Bitcoin. It goes through all these moments of just getting knocked down and then just getting back up stronger than ever. It's just relentless. And so, I count myself very lucky to have really got Bitcoin by that stage.
That is wild. That is so cool. Okay, so that actually leads me perfectly into the next thing I wanted to ask you about supply, or like supply shock. And digital scarcity and
Mm.
perfectly finite asset, money container, money. I always talk to people too about, you have money, fiat, as your time and energy being poured into a bucket, and fiat is that hole, the hole in the bucket, where Bitcoin is the first bucket that's perfectly finite, equal to your finite time and energy. And we've never had an asset that is equally finite to your time. I mean, even gold and silver, like you said, you and I are both getting into gold and silver 15, 17 years ago, and that
Mm.
still has a small inflation rate to it. And so, and amongst some other things that make it tough. But I would love for you to unpack just this, because I even just got a couple of comments recently on some of the videos we just dropped of, there can never be a supply shock with Bitcoin. Like, it's all, don't believe these people. It's, there'll always be more sellers. And so, like, again, people confusing things and just conflating
Mm.
things. So I'd love for you to unpack really what the supply shock is and why Bitcoin will continually, and you kind of just touched on this, which is, these hitting these, going up and then coming back down, and building this level of conviction where you really truly never can go all the way back down again, because now you've built so much education and conviction into
Mm-hmm.
these certain stair steps that you can't go back down. And now with companies and the treasury companies, all the nation states coming in, like you've alluded to, we're kind of coming full circle with this question in a way of, there is truly this supply shock coming. So I would love your thoughts on what that is, just unpacking it for the average person that might not understand kind of the nuance to that and why that is so important.
What I would say is that, like I said just now, those moments where we do see a big drawdown are very healing and very powerful in making Bitcoin stronger than it ever was before. There will be moments where Bitcoin is unlocked. There will, there still, the largest amount of Bitcoin is held by individuals. And, many of those whales I often talk about, like, as I said, back in 2011, when the guys who were talking about Bitcoin around me, they were just saying, oh, the tech's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And they only had to put a few $1,000s in it, and now they're billionaires, right? So how convicted are they? They didn't need to go through the hard slog that you and I went through. Right. Of, I wiped myself out with leverage. I traded shit coins.
Mm-hmm.
I did every stupid thing you can possibly imagine to lose exposure. Which generally just kept reinforcing in me that Bitcoin should be the focus. But let's be very honest and let's be very clear. The reason that it's taken us so long to get through 100K convincingly is because there's a lot of people that bought Bitcoin early and don't necessarily have the same level of conviction than we do. I don't want to say that people got lucky, but they did. A lot of people did. They bought a few $1,000s worth of Bitcoin and now it's worth billions. All right. And, maybe
that's
they've
hard
been
for
selling
people
a
to
little
accept
bit
about life. Yeah, people have a hard time accepting that. Like, that happens.
Look, I live in Switzerland. Switzerland is one of the countries where Bitcoin was adopted very early by people. FINMA actually were the leading regulator in 2018, putting full guidelines around every cryptocurrency. And, they've been the leader. I would say it's only now that regulators globally are catching up. So Switzerland was always a very advanced country in the industry. And so you had, obviously, the Ethereum Foundation was based here, right? So you had a lot of very early people in Bitcoin in Switzerland. But again, as I said, they never really made much of a distinction. For them, it was about the technology. So they participated in the Ethereum ICO and got really rich on that as well. And, all the others. And so for them, crypto and Bitcoin is quite interchangeable. And I find this a lot when I meet people in Switzerland that have been in Bitcoin for a very long time. They're not Bitcoin maxis. They're not Bitcoin maxis by any stretch of the imagination. So like, what do? They just keep selling and selling and selling. And so this is what happens. It goes into the hands of more highly convicted people like Saylor and other Bitcoin treasury companies. And those Bitcoin we know are not moving forever. But, I work closely with Willy Woo on our dollar fund. And Willy says the same thing. There will always be selling as we go into these cycles. As we get more and more heated, you're going to see the whales releasing Bitcoin. So I'm not under any illusions that the whales won't be selling. But I think that the way that people are buying is actually much more clever. You're not getting that
Yeah.
ridiculous level of hype. And so you're not seeing the runaway in the same way. And so, as I said before, you've got this sort of naturally equalizing step function where you step higher, the whales come in and they go, okay, we'll sell into that. The conviction buyers, which have the bigger wallet, are just hoovering it all up until they exhaust the selling and then they go again. The other thing to talk about, and there's a lot of FUD about this, is quantum computing, right? Quantum will unlock some of the lower grade encryption wallets that sit there with lost coins, right? I think there are 4-5 million lost Bitcoin. So at some point, those wallets where everyone else is able to upgrade and move to a quantum resistant wallet, at some point, those coins are going to become available, which again will be good for Bitcoin, because then you have everything in circulation again. You have the full money supply. It might slow things down for a couple of years, but at the end of the day, everybody is starting to get the joke that they need more Bitcoin. And so you've just got an enormous bid for Bitcoin, and that's not going to go away.
That's wild. Absolutely wild. I would love to segue to Bitcoin treasury companies, and I would love your thoughts on just everything that's going on there. And I want you to touch on some of the stuff you guys are working on, what you guys are doing, and in your goals. Jack Muller is what he's doing, and obviously Saylor and Metaplanet, and there's so many. It just feels like every day there's like 10 new announcements. What are your thoughts on just kind of this space and kind of where we're at in the cycle, I guess, of Bitcoin treasury companies?
Yeah, I talked about this on a podcast last week. I think that people need to be careful. I think that, obviously there have been some very successful companies that have replicated the MicroStrategy model, like Metaplanet, Smarter Web Company in the UK, Coincilium in the UK, H100, the blockchain group. But you're also going to get a ton of opportunists. And I think the opportunists, they're not Bitcoiners. They don't understand the aggressive model. They don't probably understand financial engineering to the degree that you need to. These are all things that are really important. And they're obviously not necessarily the same level of trustworthy people that you want to see running these companies. You want purist Bitcoiners running these companies because Bitcoin tends to align values. People tend to become much more long-term minded in terms of the way they approach things, and they can afford to be, right, because they're basing themselves on a Bitcoin standard. So when you put all of those things together, I think it's really important to just be cautious in this space. And I mentioned a few companies. I'm not necessarily endorsing them. I think that I am very comfortable with Saylor. He's shown me for 5 years that he is absolutely purist and focused. And Simon, I've known a long time at Metaplanet, so I know how focused he is, with Dylan on board as well. But everybody else is fairly early innings. I think that the companies that I mentioned, for me, those are interesting. But I'm certainly not at the point where I'm putting full trust and conviction in absolutely everything. And I think that's the thing. It's like, you got to understand there's a track record to this. Saylor's been through a bear market, right? He's iterated through a bear market. So you want to make sure that the people have that level of conviction that they can keep buying at that FTX type dip, right? And they know that they want to keep accumulating more Bitcoin. So I urge people to just tread with caution. The MNAV volatility is only going to increase. A lot of people have been concerned about Metaplanet lately, but if you look at Metaplanet's MNAV, it's really interesting. It sort of goes in waves, right? So if you look at Metaplanet over its life, it's gone in waves, and and again, it's the accretive nation of the dilution that these companies are doing is healing, right? Like if they have our higher MNAV, they're accreting more value, which means they're paying for that MNAV premium even faster. And so when you've got a company like, well, what's going on with Metaplan at the moment, where they've been sort of drifting a little bit, the stock's been drifting a little bit lower, they're accreting at the same rate that they were. So MNAV is just going drastically lower. I think we were as high as 8. Now we're at like 3.3. So, you're getting to a point where shorts, by the way, are getting given confidence. They're going, oh yeah, now people are starting to see that we were right, because you got a MNAV compression. But then they hit a point where that's compressed too far, and it triggers things the other way. They start getting squeezed. They get called on their margins. We see it in Japan a lot. There's a lot of sort of day trader short selling that happens. So it's Metaplanet particularly. It feels like the MNAV trades in waves, and so I like trading the waves of their MNAV. So I think it's an interesting one.
Do you think that what are we waiting to see with with the banana zone? Raul Paul always is talking about the banana zone, and he's was Bitcoin 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and now he's kind of ventured off into the Wild West doing who knows what. But in saying that, he is a great macro analysis. I was talking about this with Dr. Jeff Ross like a month or two ago, and I know he loves Raul Paul, and he's like, you can't throw a baby out the bathwater, even though he might say some ridiculous things. I mean, he is good at what he does. In saying that, the altcoin season, like what do you see with, do the Bitcoin Treasury companies take over a lot of this? I know, like, again, Peter is just like, oh yeah, absolutely, altcoin season's done. It's no more. And then you have like a Raul Paul who's like, oh yeah, it's coming. Like, where do you stand in that? Will the treasury companies soak up a lot of that and take away a lot of that? What do you see when it comes to that?
Yeah, as I said, I think there's a lot of big money in the space that doesn't yet understand that crypto is just nonsense. So we had a guy who was going to invest in our fund, and he had, I don't know, 1,000 Bitcoin or something. And I spoke with the relationship manager for him, and he ended up selling all his Bitcoin to buy Ethereum because he thinks the alt season is coming.
No way.
So it's like, I don't know. I'm like,
that's a real story.
I'm like, how good? Yeah, true story. And I'm like, wow, you got 1,000 Bitcoin and you still believe in Ethereum. But I find it surprising. But these things do have, this is what I'm talking about. Like in Switzerland particularly, I find that people conflate Bitcoin with Ethereum and Solana. For them, that's the 3 blue chip cryptos. So, you meet people all the time. They're like, yeah, I'm a third between the 3 blue chip cryptos. I'm like, what are the 3 blue chip cryptos? And they always say the same thing. It's Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. I'm like, have you looked at the earnings of Ethereum on their, price earnings ratio? And have you looked at that on what they potentially can do in terms of growth? I mean, like, Ethereum needs to have a 99% drop to be valued in line with Google and Amazon in terms of the same price earnings ratio. So, I mean, it's just absolute garbage, and people are going to lose a lot of money by just, again, being lazy, not doing the work, just saying, oh, they're the blue chip cryptos. And, Bitcoin's too expensive. I don't want to buy that. So, like, we see it every time, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm not going to agree with Peter on that one. I think you will see a run in cryptos because, I mean, I was looking at it this morning. XRP was up 15% or something. I'm like, who buys that? Like who, like, really? But, there are good marketing stories out there on Twitter. There's bots everywhere, I don't know. Again, when it comes back down to the, I made that comment, it's on you. I felt bad about that comment. It's not. It's like, there's so much distraction out there. There's so much, trying to vie for your dollars. And it's confusing, and it's deliberately confusing. And unfortunately, as a result, you probably will end up with a bit of a bump in altcoins. I think the bump gets less and less every cycle.
Muted,
But yeah, you will at some point probably see a run in all these things, and that's the thing. Bitcoin runs what we're running 6% in the last 48 hours. People go, okay, I better buy Ripple then.
Yeah,
because it will do better than Bitcoin.
Right,
because it's a lower unit cost.
It's wild too, because I was just looking at something, and I don't know what it was. Maybe it was end of last week or something, but it was the total, percentage of total market cap. The Bitcoin continues to, I don't know if it's all, well, it's the highs, at least, or local highs, maybe at least for the last couple of years or whatever. It's like 65%. It's like 2/3 of all the market cap is in Bitcoin, and it keeps eating away at all the other coins. And again, Bitcoin's been on top for 16 years, and it's never, no one's ever really come close to it. But even the total market cap of all the other cryptos, again, I think it's important for the average person to understand that there's Bitcoin, and then there is everything else, and there are many, many reasons for that. As Richard, we've illuminated some of them, just a few of them, but you got to, boy, oh boy, that is why I still can't believe that story of the guy 1,000 Bitcoin.
I know, but it happens every day.
That's incredible.
It's crazy. Yeah,
that's like,
how can you have 1,000 Bitcoin and still do that? Yeah,
go on the roulette wheel, take a spin.
Yeah.
That is wild. Wow. What are your thoughts on lending? So Strike coming out with the lending, different companies are coming out with the lending options. Obviously there's the handful that have been around for a while, HODL, Ledin, there's Unchained, and there's a handful of them, but there's more and more of this coming out. I feel like we're in this epoch, like we kind of mentioned earlier, of Bitcoiners are starting to really accrue wealth, and it's going to happen more and more here, obviously, in the coming months and coming years, where there's a larger cohort of people, where you had, like you said, whales who they might have been just cypherpunks, technologists, whatever, and then now they're like, well, like, okay, I'm going to cash out because I didn't totally believe in this, at least some of them. But now you have this cohort of people who are big believers. They don't want to sell their Bitcoin. Is that going to, again, reduce that selling pressure? And like, what are your thoughts on just how lending and how that is going to kind of work its way through the system here?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's the reason we launched our fund, is we had a lot of hardcore Bitcoiners who were just like, I was pitching my dollar fund. So it's dollar denominated funds, and just scoop alpha in the crypto space, because there is rich alpha. This is an emerging market. And so you just have complete price inefficiencies happening all over the place. So we built a dollar denominated fund a couple of years ago, launched it in partnership with Willy Woo. Anyway, I was sat with a client one day, and he had a lot of Bitcoin, and I said, how about you, put a few million in the fund? And he's like, every time I sell my Bitcoin, I feel like I'm chopping off a limb. It's so painful. I regret it instantly. I never want to sell any more Bitcoin. And that kind of got me thinking, is like, well, could we do something similar, just denominated in Bitcoin? So that's what we did. We ended up launching that fund in March. We had so much demand, Brandon. It ended up being triple my dollar fund at launch.
Wow.
We had to close it for new capacity. Yeah. So we're gonna reopen it for capacity in October. But yeah, I mean, we already have just so much demand. We're never going to have enough capacity to cover that demand. So it's kind of crazy. And to your point, like, Bitcoiners now, they're like, I'm not selling Bitcoin. I'm going to hold my Bitcoin. I just want a return on my Bitcoin. And, we talked about this in Vegas on one of the panels, but when you've been a Bitcoiner long enough, Bitcoin is your cash, right? So, like, as we said, measuring anything in fiat just becomes ridiculous. It's like Bitcoin is
fool's errand,
is your wealth, right? So it gets to a point where you're like, even if I can get a little bit of a return on that Bitcoin. So, the way we designed the fund was to have super low volatility, like super low volatility, like 1-2%. And then the idea that we can get in a good market environment, 5 to 10% return in Bitcoin terms. Now, it's been super quiet since we launched it, so we're returning sort of 3.5 3.8%, but still everybody in the fund is super happy. It's like
right.
3.8% of your Bitcoin is phenomenal. But yeah, I think that's just the beginning. And as I said, the level of demand that we have for that is just absolutely out of control. It was quite funny actually, because it ended up being the biggest launch of a fund in the Syz Group's history. We're a 30-year banking group. And the chairman of the board of the group, so Eric Syz, called me. He's like, Richard, what on earth is happening? Like, why?
What did you do?
What did you do? Exactly. And he's like, no, okay, fine. Now you need to come and explain to the whole board what is happening. Like, what is this Bitcoin thing? And so, because I'd been preaching to him for the 3 years that I've been with the firm, but like, you know, it's hard. It's not getting through. And so ended up presenting to the board of the Syz Group, which is 10 people over the age of 70. Some of them sit on the board of UBS as well. Some of them sit on the board of Swissquote, and all of them trying to actually understand what I'm saying, because they realize this has just been a monumental moment for the group and they need to pay attention, which is actually a really important thing, because, you know, it's only when you do something like that that they're like, okay, fine. You've been banging on about it for 3 years. Now we're ready to listen. And I think that was a really, really important point. And I think we're getting to that point with a lot of institutional allocators, which again comes back to the point, I think, that we need more than ever people like yourself to be out there educating as many people as possible, so that the people that really need it don't miss the lifeboat.
100%. Yeah. So well said. And it makes me think of too, just going back to that, like, it's the proof of work, right? Which is one of the Bitcoiner ethos. It's just, you had the body of work and the proof of work. You've been talking about it for a long time. And even though you were right on what you were saying, it's like humans have a hard time, and this goes for everyone. I think that's why it's important to illuminate. We can all talk about it, but until someone takes the action, or you show your body of work or your proof of work, then other humans start to, rightfully so, then they start to say, oh wow, maybe I should listen to you because you actually have some proof of work behind you. So I think it's a great story, just to kind of show people that are trying to orange pill others or whatever, like, hey, here it is. Like, you talked about, and then you actually put it together, took action, and then here's the body of work. And they're like, oh, okay, maybe I should listen to you now. So
yeah, exactly. Exactly right. It's hard for people to break and to listen and to say, okay, maybe you've got something you can teach me, right? And as we joked before, it's like your circle of friends are the last people somehow end up being the last people that are going to listen to you. So, yeah, it's a shame.
Basically, it sucks to be our friends, Richard. That's I feel bad for it. It's like, darn it, why did I have to be friends with Richard and Brandon? Because now I'm last to know. No, but it's just life, right? Like, that's how you can't be Messiah in your own town. So it is tough.
That's a good expression. I'm gonna take that.
Yeah, it is. Like you said, and you said it earlier too. Like, it's when you know someone, like I've known Richard for a long time. I knew him when he was a little boy, or hey, he was a goofball when he was 15, or Brandon, when I knew when he was 18, like, he made some mistakes, so I can't believe him now, 20 years later, or whatever it is, right? It's like it's tough for human beings. It's a self-defense mechanism, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are your thoughts on, like, how do you guys deal with or handle, like, the custodial aspect of what you guys are doing and seeing in the lending world? And we've kind of touched on lending and how they'll kind of contribute to the supply shock to a degree of people holding their Bitcoin or being in a collaborative custody or multi-signature, where there's people, different entities holding the keys to the Bitcoin, for anyone listening and not totally understanding what that means, but where you retain part of that ownership, but then you're able to get the fiat to then go do what you want. People think of it, of lending against your house, or a home equity line of credit, or home equity loan against your house, or whatever it is. So how do you guys deal with that and educate people on the custodial aspect, which to me is really, we talked about earlier, what orange pilled me or clicked with me. That was, for me, it was like, well, I can custody an asset. Like, can't do that. I was a real estate guy and a gold and silver guy. and you got bank vaults, and the property wants,
Mhm.
or the city wants property taxes or whatever it is, the municipality. So the Bitcoin, it was the first time you can actually own truly and walk, across the earth or fly around the world with your asset and take it with you. So how do you guys handle that and approach that subject?
So look, just to be really clear, the Syz group has Syz Capital in it, where I sit. So we're an asset management product group where we create asset management products, funds for people to invest in. Another sister company of ours at Syz Capital, part of the same group, is Syz Bank. So Syz Bank, they allow people to buy and sell crypto. We have a slightly different message at Syz Capital. We're like Bitcoin only. Like that's all you should do. If anyone ever asks me, I'm just Bitcoin only. And Mark Syz is the same. But in the bank, they talk a little bit more broadly about these things, and
Yeah.
they do borrowing and lending, but they only do it. They only provide you an LTV on the ETFs. So if you can have actual Bitcoin with them, but if you have actual Bitcoin with them, you have zero LTV. So you can't borrow money against it. This is just really to do with the mechanics of dealing with real Bitcoin. And so it's one of the main reasons that I hold Bitcoin ETFs, because it means that I can get leverage against them to trade around in the Bitcoin treasuries, for example. But that's how we as a group think about borrowing and lending against Bitcoin at this point in time, i.e. we don't do it. There are other banks in Switzerland that are starting to do it, but few and far between and in very limited size with very low LTVs. And then, of course, there's some startup companies that are starting to look at this space, which are very well backed in the VC space. Vulgar Ventures are involved with many of them. They're the Tether's venture group that invest in predominantly Bitcoin only endeavors. But yeah, I think we're going to see this really emanate, as you said, sort of the multi-sig solutions are going to emanate out of the startup space for the time being. There is OnRamp in the US that provides solutions. That's a really good team of people that I've always been impressed by. And I like the fact that they have a venture fund that is denominated in Bitcoin, where they invest in Bitcoin only companies, but they denominate the fund in Bitcoin, because that's the only way you should denominate the fund, really. Because if you're denominating it in dollars and you're saying that I can outperform Bitcoin with my fund, then you should denominate the fund in Bitcoin, because I don't want to pay you performance fees on Bitcoin in dollars, right? Which we all know is going to the moon. So like that's just money you're taking off me unnecessarily. So OnRamp have a Bitcoin denominated venture fund called Early Riders. So yeah, I mean, they're doing things the right way over there. So I have respect for that.
Bitcoin being truth in the fact that Bitcoiners right now, as it stands, are right again, and truth is truth, and it's cracking, smashing through all-time highs. What do you see right now when you kind of look out on the horizon when it comes to price, liquidity pools, M2, like what do you look at when you're doing analysis on it and say, hey, how far can this run? Where are we at in the cycle? Things of that nature. Like when you look at it, what are you generally looking at to say, hey, this is where we're at and this is where we're going?
Well, I think that's a very relevant question, because I don't know. I don't think anybody knows what this cycle is actually going to look like. A lot of people have been trying to compare it to 2017, but it just feels different.
Yeah.
The comfort I have had at these sort of step levels changes, that we're not going lower, has been higher than ever before. I mean, look, I'm always very bullish, because I have the view, and I think most people watching our podcast do, that this is the best asset that anyone we'll ever be able to create on planet Earth. And so
if you're liking this interview, but you're just wondering, you know what, Brandon, this is amazing stuff. And I get you have these guests on and they're talking about how orange pilling the world is so great and how Bitcoin is going to take over the world. How in the world do I educate my family and friends? How do I get people to understand what most people just don't care about, quite honestly? Bitcoin trading cards is the way to do that. When you open up these cards, you see the foil cards, you see the chase, you see the glossy cards, young, old, boy, girl, man, woman, it doesn't matter. People love these cards. It's awesome because they're super valuable, by the way. Amazing little side note. However, it Trojan horses them into the most important thing of the day. It's not politics. It's not all the things that we fight about. It's changing the money, fix the world. Bitcoin trading cards is the best way that we have going in order to do that, no matter who you are. You're gonna love them. Playable Characters 10 for 10% off at checkout. Playable Characters 10 off at checkout. btc-tc.com. You're going to absolutely love these things. Now back to the show.
as a result, you know it's going up forever. So I'm always bullish. I think what we've seen this cycle so far is just this constant. It's really not volatile. Like Bitcoin has this rather unique volatility skew, where upside volatility is actually, prices options much more aggressively. So you end up with upward skew. Whereas in traditional markets, you see skew much more to the downside, where put protection is much more expensive. In Bitcoin, it's always the reverse, because you see such explosive upside moves. This time so far, and obviously we've had a big move over the weekend just gone, it feels like we're getting to the point where we've got indigestion from the amount of demand coming through versus the supply coming out. I think Jesse Myers has a really good explainer. Croesus BTC, I think he wrote it under, but a really good explainer about how we get through the sort of secondary supply of Bitcoin that's available at the sort of the new price post halving. And then once it's eaten through all of that, then you get this massive spike because we're in price discovery. And it definitely felt that 2020, 2021, we had a somewhat mooted cycle because of all the nonsense with FTX and obviously the Fed having a hard reverse after, telling everybody that we were not going to be likely having any kind of rate rises. So it was a bit of a shock to the market. So it felt like 2021 never actually managed to have its bull cycle. So it feels this time that we're on our way there, and obviously it does look a lot like 2017. However, the step changes, what I was trying to get to, the step changes haven't been so volatile. So you go up, you get to 120K, you sort of sit there for a while. You overshoot a little bit and then you come back down and it's level off. And so it feels like we've done that all the way along from 70K, when we touched 70K on the back of the tariff shock in April. We've been 70K, 85K, 95K, 100K, 110K, and it's just been step. And it just feels like the buyers, obviously the treasuries are a big buyer, the Bitcoin treasuries, they're a big buyer, and they're just eating up all that supply at those levels and then grind to the next level. And it feels very much like that's what we're doing this cycle. Although now, of course, we're coming into price discovery. So where do we go? I mean, I've been saying this year I expect 200,000. I don't think that's is a very ridiculous estimate. I think it's entirely possible. And it's, potentially not going to take an enormous amount of dollars in to get us to that additional, almost 2 trillion of market cap.
Do you think that we have I got numerous questions I kind of like spin off here, but my first one is, do you think, what are your thoughts on just the cycle here that we're in? Do you think it's, because a lot of it has seemed like over the years that you kind of have these, 4 or 5, 6 month really hard run ups, kind of like what you were alluding to in a way, these stair steps, and then it runs up, whether, did it end in 2017, did it end in 2021 or earlier in 2021, but then again, later in 2021, what are your thoughts on, are you a cycles guy? Do you think there will be some type of breakout in the sense of a super cycle? When you look out across the bow in terms of that, how do you see things playing out?
I've been of the opinion that we'll see the super cycle pretty soon. I thought it was a possibility last cycle, but now you've got everything just lined up. I could never have imagined that we'd be as far progressed as we are now, where you've got US with a Bitcoin strategic reserve policy. You've got the state of Texas trying to buy Bitcoin now. You've got the Pakistani government trying to buy Bitcoin. You've got Bhutan, El Salvador, mining and trying to acquire more Bitcoin. And you've got Saudi and Abu Dhabi buying the ETFs, and in the case of Saudi's sovereign wealth fund, buying actual Bitcoin. So you've got a huge amount of sovereign interest in Bitcoin. You've got the ETFs, which is seeing more and more flow. And I think that's where a lot of the retail flow is going now, is into the ETFs. But obviously that's opening up the 401ks, and you're seeing more and more of the brokers coming online being able to buy Bitcoin. And then, of course, you've got the BTCTCs, the Bitcoin corporate treasuries. And I see that as a phenomena that is just in its infancy. I think we're going to see more and more of these companies pop up. Obviously, the goal of UTXO is to have one of these countries in every national stock market globally. And I think they'll achieve that. I mean, I hear about more and more of these companies every single day. So we are absolutely in the expedited growth phase of this, but I think it can persist for a while. And as long as the companies stay away from any kind of excessive debt or non-convertible debt, then I think it's very sustainable. A lot of the critics of the Bitcoin treasury space talk about leverage. Oh, this is going to be the next leverage blow up in crypto. And they just obviously, once again, haven't done the work. They think that, I think someone came up with the acronym LBE, with the L being leveraged to describe these companies. Yeah, that's a bad name because it implies there's leverage, and the lazy critic is going to say, oh, well, you're leveraged, and so therefore you're gonna blow up when the cycle reverses. Well, I think we're getting to a point where the cycle's reversal is going to be a lot shallower. I don't think you're going to have these deep bear markets like we used to have before. I think everyone sees that as an accumulation opportunity. I certainly know when Bitcoin dipped to 70,000 in April, I was doing everything I possibly could to try and borrow money to buy more Bitcoin ETFs through my bank. But I think we're in a very different cycle. We're at a very different stage. It's got to the sovereign level now, which, coming back to the point we were discussing earlier, is even more of a concern, right? Because that single mother in London is now really late, is going to be late. There's going to be a point where they're going to be late. And rather than being able to buy potentially one Bitcoin, they're going to, struggle to buy scraps with their remaining life's work and their savings. So, this is why I always want to do these podcasts, to try and reach as many people as possible, because they're, if you go onto these platforms like LinkedIn, there's these people trying to.
You and Bram.
It's awful.
Glutton for punishment.
It's just an awful place. Yeah. I don't know how Bram does it. Like, he goes on there on a regular basis to try and sort of counter all these critics who know absolutely nothing about Bitcoin, but do everything they can to try and keep people away from Bitcoin. It's really sad that people do that. I don't understand why they do that. It's maybe just to get more followers. I don't know what they're doing, actually.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Where do you think, and again, these are this one's even tougher when it comes to price and just like where you think things are headed, but where in 10 years, Saylor talks about the gold rush, the digital gold rush, obviously the next 10 years or so, where do you fall on his spectrum, I guess, of, we'll say even 10 or 20 years from now, like when you see the base case. I know he's kind of updated just recently a little bit, but the 3 million to 13 million, or 3 million to 20 million, somewhere in there, and then 45 million or what have you, in 20 years. Like, where do you fall on that spectrum of his cases?
Yeah, look, I think Saylor does a remarkable job of communicating this stuff to people and being able to, like we said before, being able to speak to a much broader community than I can speak to. But I think it's funny. I took my daughter to BTC Prague, and she was bored out of her mind most of the time. And but I'd been on stage just before Saylor, so she was already watching the stage when he came on, and I didn't, because there was just people everywhere, obviously, for the Saylor thing. So I didn't get to see her until after the Saylor talk. And so she was sat there with, I think it was with Neil Jacobs, actually. And she listened to everything he said, and it really spoke to her. And she came out. She was like, yeah, Dad, you need to get to 48 Bitcoin, because if you get to 48 Bitcoin, then by the time I'm 32, I'll be a billionaire. I was like, my goodness. Well, yeah. Somehow you took in the numbers and you were sitting there doing the maths. It was good. But look, he's really clear, and I think obviously to have a young person engage to that level, then it's great, because obviously he engages everybody. I think that pays attention. I think that talk was very good in terms of getting into the numbers. Obviously he's done some fiddling around with the spreadsheets and thinking, and we're going to get to the point where measuring Bitcoin in dollars is a fairly ridiculous exercise anyway. You just want as much Bitcoin as you can possibly get, and 1 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin. Volatility goes to 0 because you measure everything in Bitcoin, right? So I think fiat measurement, when you get out that long in the timeline, when you're talking 21 years, I think it'll become slightly ridiculous, as he's suggesting with his modeling, right?
Right. Where do you stand in terms? You have Peter Dunworth, who I'm good friends with, where he's like, it's, Bitcoin's going to be $1 billion. It's going to be multiples of the 900 trillion, global assets. You've got Jeff Booth, who says it's going to be it's all 900 trillion. Bitcoin has to account for everything in the system. And then you have like a Jack Mallers, who's, it's Bitcoin's 1/2 of every transaction, and money's 1/2. So he's a 450 trillion market cap type of guy for Bitcoin itself. Where do you, and then there's obviously people all under that as well. Where do you stand on the total addressable market, the TAM for Bitcoin? Like, when you look at Bitcoin as an asset, as a money, an investment, all these things, because that's what's remarkable about Bitcoin. It's all of these things together. Where do you, how do you stack it up? Like, what is its total, what is its end game? Like, where does it eventually end up on that ladder?
Yeah, I'm going to disappoint you with my answer, I guess. I think we get to a point where trying to evaluate in fiat, as Peter Dunworth said, when he's saying billions of dollars of Bitcoin, I mean, it's just like, dollars worthless. Like, what's it worth in Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin's worth everything. Dollars worth nothing. So it just comes down to this: Saylor says it best. Only put the money you don't want to lose in Bitcoin, right? Like, that's the sort of his latest. You should only invest in Bitcoin the money you can't afford to lose, right? And I think that's perfect. Like, that just says it perfectly. It doesn't matter what the price is. You just, because the price in fiat doesn't mean anything. It's the price in fiat is just basically the market telling you that most of the world don't understand Bitcoin yet, right? That's what the price of Bitcoin in dollars is telling you, right? I always say, when you break it down into what Bitcoin is, Bitcoin is so superior to gold in terms of a store of value asset, that when you break it down into the various different monetary properties of gold, and you say, okay, you can see very clearly that Bitcoin is multiple times better than gold, even if we just put it at gold's market cap, which today would imply a price of $1.1 million, so $23 trillion, then Bitcoin is, 90% undervalued. So do you want to buy something that is 90% undervalued? Yes, because the market will eventually work it out. And it's at least 90% undervalued because it's better than gold. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry I can't give you some sort of longer term view, but I just think that we get to the point of completely breaking when your circle of friends becomes, rather than 5% of your circle of friends, it becomes 70% of your circle of friends, then the fiat price doesn't matter anymore. It's irrelevant.
Yeah. That's such a great point. And that is the end game. And we touched on this earlier a little bit too, about the dollar, crisis that we're in, and we've been in for a long time. And that's what's so, like, the frog in the boiling pot is so hard to see for the average person, not even the average person. It's hard to see for us too. I mean, like, you get caught up in just in a malaise every day, just living your life. It's very hard to see day in and day out until you zoom out. And that's what, like you said earlier, most people don't give it 2 seconds to even zoom out and then look at the whole picture and say, hey, what am I looking at here? That's what's really wild. What are you most excited about and you're most concerned about inside of the Bitcoin space going forward?
I'd say it's one thing, and that's Bitcoin Treasury companies. I'm excited about them because I think the growth is going to be exponential, but I'm also concerned because, as I said, I think there will be opportunists that come and start to try and do it in not the best way. I also do worry about their custody policies. Like, the worst thing that could possibly happen is one of these companies gets hacked because they've been a bit sloppy around their infrastructure solutions. So I do think that it's really important that we start to see these companies announcing their frameworks for how they deal with custody, their governance protocols. So I think you will want to gravitate towards the companies that are being transparent around their governance. So I'm the most excited about them. I think there's a huge amount of upside. A lot of Bitcoin purists are negative against them because they think it takes money away from Bitcoin. And I think that's missing it a little bit. I think you have to understand that these companies are like the release valve of the financial system. I've said this a lot, but I'll say it again to your audience. Like, these companies are essentially the release valve of the overprinting of fiat money that has gone into the financial markets, because that's predominantly where that money's gone. It's pushed valuations in equities to just non-investable levels. If you're an equity portfolio manager, you're trying to put a portfolio together to outperform the S&P, and you don't invest in Apple, even though Apple is trading at some stupid price earnings valuation based on their zero growth at the moment, then you are going to underperform, because Apple and the Mag 7 keep outperforming because of the passive investment flows that keep coming, driven predominantly by money printing. Same in the bond market, right? Bonds are, trading at yields that are just not representative of, the level of debasement, right? Why? Because all these pension funds are forced to buy bonds, and they have more and more money is being printed and pushing these bonds prices ever higher, which means yields are getting lower and lower, which means you're buying a dollar-based bond that is underperforming by a factor of 5 sometimes the rate of debasement. Like, how are you supposed to invest capital? And then, of course, there's the volatility managers that, they're dealing with convertible bonds. And that's obviously an area that I was very focused on in my TradFi career in a bank, where vol has been completely destroyed by money printing because, you don't have natural free markets. So the minute anything goes wrong, print a load of money, save the market, volatility gets, cut to zero. And so these convertible bond managers are desperate for something that's volatile. These bond managers are desperate for something that pays them the rate of debasement. And these equity managers are desperate for something that can outperform the Mag 7. What is that? That's Bitcoin. What is it in the bond market? It's Saylor and his preference shares. What is it in the vol market? It's the convertible bonds being issued by Bitcoin Treasury companies, because they're being moved around by that huge dinosaur tail that is Bitcoin, that multi-trillion-dollar asset. And that volatility is still very, very large. So all of those things are basically sucking desperately in need of something powered by Bitcoin. And that's what these Bitcoin treasury companies are filling as a void and plugging that problem in the dam of all that money that's exploding, trying to get out. So you've got this tiny hiss of that bicycle tire valve right now, but at some point the dam is going to burst and everybody is going to realize how much they need Bitcoin.
Incredible stuff, Richard. Any last thoughts? Anything we missed about Syz Capital, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have a podcast. It's not entirely focused on Bitcoin. It's called Seize the Future, SYZ. Obviously, seize, that's how you say it. So I actually called the podcast Seize the Future, so people would learn how to say the word seize, because it was very frustrating, smart. All the different things people would come up with. Yeah, Seize the Future. We talk about everything. You know, we had a release this week on seed oils and how toxic seed oils are. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's back to what's the problem, and the problem is fiat, and fiat leads to all these other problems in society. So that's what I try to address with the podcast, is to drill down on a specific problem and look at where the solution may lie. And I always ask the guest at the end how they allocate capital. And funnily enough, when you're an expert dealing with a problem, you end up realizing that Bitcoin is the answer to a lot of these problems.
Absolutely incredible stuff. Where can people find you?
So Seize the Future on every podcast channel, Richard Byworth, all one word, on Twitter, X, and LinkedIn as well, although I try to avoid that place like the plague.
Mr. Richard Byworth, thank you so much for joining me today, being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you, sir.
Cheers, Brandon.
If you can't get enough of these interviews and you want to deepen your education on sound money, wealth building, and freedom, you're not going to want to miss this playlist here. Happy binging. Check it out now. We'll see you inside.